growing up in the 50s and 60s and being able to get a loan in the mid 50s and 60s. Mm-hmm. And that was only possible because he lived in New Jersey. He knew if he lived 500 miles south, he wouldn't even get anything at that time. So I think it's so important to talk to other people about, experiences.
Yes, because that's happened before where we've, wanted to capture stories. Mm-hmm. And something happens to the person and we're like, we just wish we could have captured it earlier. Yeah. So I think, just being proactive with it, right. And just getting that history is crucial. So.
Right. Well, so I want to shift gears a little bit now into the month that we're in, that we were, I guess, quote unquote, blessed with Black History Month. I don't think it should be Black History Month. I just think it should be Black History Observation every day of the year.
Sure.
Because we've been
of course.
We've been discredited so much and marginalized, and as what's the term? Somebody said they bury our history or something like that. Mm-hmm. Basically, they bury our past to make us not know who we actually are. Right. But since we are here and we are observing Black History Month, talk about the preservation of African American history and your encounters with it.
I love that question because it's really where I fell in love with archives. Right. Because when I was first working with the Digital Library of Georgia, I was working with the Civil Rights Digital Library. Mm-hmm. So I was working with civil rights movement related archives, and it was just incredible. It was so empowering for me. And that's really what I think I was able to connect. I was able to connect with the archives I was working with as a Black woman, and I think it did something to me. It put me in a different type of mindset. And I think just being able to preserve the history, preserving history is what I love, but when you can preserve the history of your people, there's just something about that, I think, that it's hard to not be affected by that every day. And I also ended up doing a paid internship at the Atlanta University Center in Atlanta. So that's where we have Spelman College, Morehouse College, Clark Atlanta University, and the Interdenominational Theological Seminary. And the richness of those materials and in terms of documenting African American life in Atlanta, education, civil rights. Right. And at that time, the Tupac Shakur collection was visiting there. The Morehouse College Martin Luther King collection lives there all the time. Maynard Jackson, who was the first African American mayor of Atlanta, his collection is there. Just a variety of things that are just, you can kind of see yourself in the collections, I guess. You can see where you came from, and you can see the people that, their lives have directly impacted why I am where I am today. So that's what made me fall in love with archives in the first place. And again, not saying that every archivist needs to work with collections that document their ethnic group, but I do think that it's an extremely empowering experience that I do believe everyone should get to. I think everyone should get a chance to be able to do that at some point.
Right. And I think that is the connection that gives you the motivation to do such thing, because if you are passionate about something, if something is near and dear to you, and then you get to do a job that preserves that same thing that has been discredited for so long, then you're automatically going to say yes. So I think that's very, very amazing. You talked about the civil rights movement and doing archiving with them. Finding gems. What types of gems, email, letters, and stuff like that have you found? When you were in the class, you were passing out a letter from, I think, a fan of Coretta Scott King?
She was Alice Newton. She wrote, or she was a writer herself. Okay. I think a local writer. Okay. And she bought, or I think she purchased a book that Coretta Scott King had just written called My Life with Martin Luther King Jr.
And that was like a couple of years after he passed.
Exactly. And so she wrote Coretta, and Coretta wrote back to her. And we have the response letter, which is what I showed in class. And so it literally was hiding inside of the book. So you have an archival record inside of a rare book. And you have evidence of this book and its story and what it meant to Coretta, what it meant to this Alice Newton woman.
Right. And the book actually belonged to Alice Newton.
It did, and she donated it to Southern Polytechnic State University, which KSU merged with that university.
Right.
And so it was just sitting in their library, just resting, and that story was in there, and so it's amazing to be able to show that.
Right. Yeah, I think that is really amazing because it helps you it basically brings back a little bit of reality brings forward the reality of the past to today and let you live in it a little bit. That's why things like those are important, because it's just like helps you to be in a place where you feel like you're a part of history in the moment that it was happening. And that letter, basically, that's how it made me feel. Now, obviously, she was passing it around the class, the girl that was with you that day, so I couldn't really get a full look at it. But at the end of the class, I came up and I wanted to read the whole thing, because I'm like, I've never met any of these people. I've only been in this country 5 years, and 5 years of exposure is all I have of the civil rights era, slavery in America. And to see that in front of me, knowing that she literally probably sat on her typewriter and typed that response back to that lady, was just like so impressive. And I was like, wow.
I'm so glad that you feel that way. I think because sometimes it's interesting, you're coming from an international perspective, and some people who I think were born here and who this is their history, sometimes they, I think, have trouble, being in awe of it and connecting to it. But I love that you said that, though, because, again, Coretta Scott King is not with us anymore, so all we have are her materials.
Right.
That's all we have left to understand her.
Right.
And so I think that's something that people probably don't realize until maybe sometimes I think when they get older, I guess you could say they can start to realize that. But my goal is to help people to understand that, at this point in their lives, especially when they're in college.
Yeah, that's pretty dope. You mentioned like doing internships for different schools and stuff like that. What organizations are you a part of currently, and what is their mission? What is their goal? What are they trying to do?
Yeah, so in terms of like the communities that I work with, or like more professional organizations?
I would say communities, because that's something I'm also very, very interested in.
Of course. So one thing that I'm not so much actively involved with them anymore, simply because of the distance of where I live now.
Right.
But one of the things I did before I was actually got the job here is I worked with a community archives. And I can explain what a community archives is.
Sure, have a way.
A community archives is a little bit different than like a big university archives or anything like that. A community archive is basically where people from the community, they're not professionals or anything, if they are unhappy with the way that, I guess, history has been represented about their group of people, they decide they're going to archive it themselves.
Right.
And usually it's inside of like a house or something something very humble.
Yeah. And
they create an archives about their group of people. So I literally, I did it at the Flat Rock Archives in Lithonia. Mm-hmm. I worked with them for like 2 years, volunteer, of course, because they don't really have money. And it was the archives was inside of a historic home, like a 100-year-old house.
Wow. And
they had Johnny Waits. He was the principal person there, and he was awesome. But they just archived everything. They kept artifacts. They kept records, pictures, furniture from just all from community members all throughout the Flat Rock community, because they felt like, and the Flat Rock community is mostly African American community, and in DeKalb County, and they had felt like, they just really weren't acknowledged as a part of DeKalb County history.
Wow.
So I worked with them, and that was a really great experience because it's such a tight-knit community, and they were so serious about, about their history.
They're like, you better make sure
exactly
we get credit for this.
Exactly, and they were not playing around. It was great. And a lot of times it was just me and Johnny, in the house trying to figure out all the stuff that was in there, and he was helping me figure out who it belonged to and family connections. So that was really great. I can't really do it now because it's so far from where I live now.
Right.
I had to move when I got this job. But some people that I've connected with now that I absolutely love are the Cobb County NAACP, who I mentioned in the class that I was in with you. They're a great, very awesome organization. Their headquarters is in Marietta, Georgia, but they serve all of Cobb County. They are awesome, and we archive their records here. I also work with people like the Kennesaw Historical Society because Kennesaw has the history has sometimes not been acknowledged either, just because it's been kind of it was kind of a small town in its beginnings, and so they're just now starting to really get their history promoted, and so trying to always help the underserved communities is kind of one of my goals.
Nice. That's pretty good. In that you mentioned creating an archive. Let's say you have a book, simple book, and it's a book that belonged to somebody in the late 1920s. What is the process of archiving that book? If you could give me a step-by-step after discovering it, what's the next couple of steps?
Sure. The thing about archiving and preserving things is that, it can sometimes cost a lot of money, but what you do is you just do what you can do. You do what you can. And so if you had a book and you're like, this book is special and I want to preserve this and archive it, what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to, take the book, and it's always good to put things into another casing if that's possible. It helps shield it from usually it helps shield it from the elements. So sometimes if it's going to have to, if you're worried about different things interacting with it or pets or things like that in your home, sometimes it's good to keep it in a box. But if not, you're going to want to mostly keep it in just a little bit cooler temperatures if possible. So you're not going to want to put it in the attic. And it's tempting to put it in the basement. That's not a good place to put it either because basements are very susceptible to flooding and also to temperature fluctuations. We're going to want to put it in a cooler place with humidity not too high if we can, but mostly you don't want the temperature to be going up and down with the book because it'll that kind of can create mold or it can cause different elements to deterioration. Exactly. And it's very, very tempting to put it on a wooden bookshelf, but if you can help it, we don't want to put it on a wooden bookshelf because wood has a lot of chemicals and it off gases, meaning that it gives off those chemicals all the time. And over time, that will deteriorate the book. So, but again, if it's in your home, you can only do what you can do. So I think the best things would be to keep it away from pets, keep it away from food, put it in a nice stable temperature, and if you can put it in some type of box, that might be a good idea. But if not, just keep an eye on it. Make sure keep dirt away, keep pests away, things like that. So, and also impart on your children or your family how important this thing is, so they know not to throw it away.
Gotcha. That's it's actually more simple than I thought. I thought it would have been like a certain process. You got to do this or that. It's basically as simple as protecting something from the external dangers of itself.
Exactly, because, professional archivists, we do a whole bunch of things. We do, we have acid-free, lignin-free everything. Sometimes we do special preservation work where we tie things with special ribbon and we work with special plastics. that's for, professionals.
Right.
But, I don't want, I hate for people to think that they can't do anything at home.
Yeah.
And when you're at home, I have some stuff at my apartment that I'm like, this is, some stuff from my great grandmother and things,
Yeah.
and I can't do what I do at work with it.
Right.
But hey, I can,